Yo, what's up? With the Americans receiving two very important items for high tier gameplay, we can finally continue our series of high BR guides. And the Americans absolutely need a guide for that because this nation is by far the hardest to play in Enlisted for multiple reasons. First of all, the player base is usually not the best and by a wide margin. Secondly, the gear, although being good and in some regards extremely good, complementary to what your enemies are bringing up, you're still gonna have some very strong opposition. Reasons for the player quality issues are that most new players are coming from America, and most of those want to play Americans. And most of those don't want to wait on low BR, they want to jump straight into high BR. Now this leads to numerous problems like players not playing properly in teams, having no coordination, no team play or teamwork, and emphasis lies on work because if you're in an inferior team against superior enemy teams, you really need to be extremely well coordinated and disciplined, otherwise you completely get crushed. And this is something these teams will be lacking usually, so be prepared to do in many games lots of serious work yourself and to know exactly what to do. Don't worry, everything will be explained in this guide. And the last problem you're gonna have playing Americans is that even though you have some of the strongest items in the game, the recent updates gave other nations, most notably your two enemies, the Germans and the Japanese, equal or arguably even superior items. So if you want to win as an American, prepare for some very hard battles, but also for some extremely satisfying wins. Last warning before we dive into the details, since the battles you fight as Americans are usually uphill struggles, it becomes oftentimes necessary to deform your army to make it as strong as possible and therefore also looking unusual. So if you want to have fun, of course you can build all the armies you want. What I'm going to show you here is the setup for the strongest, most devastating army you can have as an American. And we start with the most important aspect of your forces, the planes, specifically the P-47. This plane manages to hold the title of not only strongest plane in the game, but also possibly strongest vehicle overall in the game. Reason for that is, you have the not only easiest way to wipe out large amounts of enemies, but also strongest way. The 10 HVAR rockets you have are quite easy to aim, they don't require too much skill, and they also bring utter destruction. And you can even blow up high tier items like the Hori tank from the Japanese, which is one of the strongest tanks overall in the game, but very susceptible to even HVAR rockets nearby. If you're up against King Tigers, you need to hit the King Tigers straight up with your HVAR rocket, though even then it won't explode always. But don't worry, you still have your 250 kilogram bomb. So this bomb can blow up literally everything in the game. As long as you bring it close to the target, every tank will die, and groups of enemies anyway. So this is exactly what you need if you're up against overpowered enemy armies, enemy players and teams, because this will equal the playing field. If you have multiple vehicle slots in your army, I recommend to put in absolutely always one P-47 and then either a tank or another fighter plane. If you only have one slot, it becomes complicated because most of your teammates will have this one too. In that case, it becomes smarter to either take a fighter plane or a tank to maximize the chances that you can actually use your vehicle, because there's always very strong competition for the P-47 for a good reason. Since this is the strongest thing your army can have, you absolutely need to have one P-47 in the air at all times. If you don't have it in the air, you're seriously lacking in what your army can actually do. And if you're in a game, if you're in a battle that you're losing and you don't have a P-47 in the air, although the map being very good for planes, you know the reason why you're behind. What makes the P-47 so dominating is not only the fact that it kills absolutely everything on the ground, but also everything in the air. Thanks to its ridiculously high speed, it's okay turn rate, it's really good climb rate, and it's absolutely insane 8 heavy machine guns. Even touching an enemy plane with a salvo of these 8 heavy machine guns means the plane is dying. So this will clear out the sky in most cases. But once again, keep in mind, if you're playing high BR, you're up against competent teams most often, players who play the game for a long time and have many things, or almost everything even, upgraded and unlocked. This means the enemies know that you're an American and they know that you're bringing your P-47s. And most of the time, once you start annoying them too much with your P-47, they will bring 2 planes. Anti-air guns and stuff like that isn't too relevant on high BR because the planes are so fast, it's going to be hard to actually hit you. But being double tagged by your enemies with 2 planes is actually an issue. So for that reason, you might wanna have a fighter plane, either in order to revenge kill or shoot back the enemy planes, or to, if you already have a P-47 player in your team and he's getting attacked by the enemy planes, you want to have a second plane and therefore you want a fighter. The clearly best fighter, and there are 2 fighter options you can use. This is the newest edition and overall the strongest. It looks, ironically enough, like a mix of a ME-262 with a Stuka. The wing design is quite close to the Stuka design, and the cockpit design and backtail design is very close to the Messerschmitt design. Very interesting design from the American engineers. The weaponry this carries is 8 HWAS. So yes, this is literally a fighter plane that has more destructive power than, I would say, 95% of all attacker planes in the game. And you get 4 autocannons. 4 20mm autocannons placed quite nicely on both sides close to the cockpit. So you're spread out quite well. So if you aim too far left or too far right at an enemy plane, you're still gonna hit, but not too far away from the center, meaning that, well, as long as you're aiming remotely center, you also make sure you're gonna hit. So this is quite perfect. You get enough ammunition for all 4 autocannons to spray away and kill multiple planes, even complete 5 bomber rate run, and you can still strafe the ground. Yep, and of course you also get your very good speed, your good climb rate, and your okay turn rate. This thing isn't too good at dogfighting if you try to do maneuvers. So make sure you keep your altitude and keep your speed, and just, as long as you're the first one to shoot at the enemy, you're gonna win because nothing survives 4 autocannons. So this is the double team you want to have in your army, preferably P-47 and the AP-4C, making absolutely sure you keep the air dominance, because if you lose the air dominance on the ground, it's going to be extremely hard to regain some dominance on the battlefield, because the planes are the best thing the Americans have. If you're not a big fan of rockets, you even have an excellent alternative for the fighter planes, and it's the P-51D. Why is that so? Well, before the introduction of the AP-4C, this was by far the best fighter plane for the Americans. Reason for that is extremely good speed, good enough turn rate, 6 heavy machine guns, and 2 heavy bombs. Now, this is basically also as strong as it gets as a fighter plane. You have amazing enemy anti-aircraft capabilities, and you have 2 heavy bombs, meaning if your attacker plane doesn't blow up the King Tiger, you can blow up the King Tiger very easily, and everything else on the ground too. So it's important to be not only able to shoot down enemy planes, but to kill enemy tanks as an American pilot, because once again, your enemies will bring the best tanks in the game, the most dangerous tanks in the game. You need to be able to blow up King Tigers, because your tanks won't be. No, the Pershing won't help, spoiler alert. And the Hori, despite being a bit easier to kill than in King Tiger, the fact that it usually camps in the gray zone makes it also almost impossible to kill, and you need your rockets or your bombs, and this thing ensures that you have those bombs. Next we have our tanks, and there are 2 tanks that are very much viable for the Americans, and the best thing is they're actually complementary. So if you want, if you have enough slots, you can play both. I personally would do if I had any more slots. First of all, obviously, to no one's surprise, the Pershing. Why the Pershing? Very simple. He's got the 90mm cannon. Yes. Look how long it is. It's ridiculously long. It has extremely good penetration. It has 4 types of ammunition, meaning you can not only create huge high explosive explosions, and the radius of this is really, really good, especially in the Pacific where you have lots of bushes and hills and rocks and so on. Just shoot somewhere. You don't need to see the enemies hiding everywhere. You're gonna kill enemies halfway across the whole screen. So this is good. You have armor piercing high explosive shells, and you have just hard super piercing shells that don't explode, they don't deal too much damage, but they pierce everything you see in the game basically. So as long as you know where your enemy tankers are hiding, for example for the Hori, the tankers are hiding here, 2 of them are left, 2 of them are right, and 2 here, so drivers. You can pierce here through the left, then here through the right, and make sure the enemy won't shoot you back. And congratulations, enemy tank becomes useless. So this thing has the best power, has the best destruction overall, and it has some good armor, well, relatively good armor. These numbers are usually already by themselves insane, but the fact that you're playing high BR means you're still getting panned by the King Tiger, and by the Hori of course too, and even the Panther G has some ridiculously good penetration, even better than the one of the normal Tiger E, the Tiger 1. So don't feel too safe against the best enemy tanks, but you're still safe enough to survive strafing from the air or bombs that don't land perfectly close to you. So yep, take your Pershing and make sure the enemies suffer on the battlefield. If you're up against enemies who don't answer your Pershing by killing it with their tanks, congratulations, you will win the game easily, because if this thing isn't answered, it's gonna dominate. The difference between this and the King Tiger is the King Tiger has an extremely good gun and ridiculously good armor. The Pershing has a better gun, so once again also an extremely good gun, but weaker armor. But weaker armor is only a liability if the enemies actually blow you up. As long as they don't deal with you, congratulations. Yeah, your weak armor doesn't matter. What matters then is only the 90mm cannon, and this cannon will shred everything. Also, your reload time is quite good, especially your reload time is actually extremely good. You don't get the penalty for slower reload. Yeah. By the way, for those who wonder historically why is it 90mm, not more, very simple. American engineers figured out 90mm is the biggest caliber you can still reload with one tanker. Meaning you can reload it in one piece. So you have your shell and your propellant. If you have anything beyond 90mm, and this is already very hard for the crew to handle, like the 120mm in the IS-2, you start requiring 2-part ammunition, and then reload speed becomes extremely slow. So these 90mm are literally the limit of what is humanly possible when you want ridiculously high explosive power and also a very high fire rate. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where your enemies are easily dealing with your Pershing constantly, or if you start a map like D-Day, for example, where you don't need the ridiculously high firepower, but you need to survive for a while to make sure you shell and clear out all the bunkers, there's another good tank that's worthwhile, and it's of course the Jumbo. Now, why the Jumbo? Very simple, look at the front turret armor. Exactly. The 177mm mean that you survive shots that even your Pershing can't survive. And unlike what many people expect, this front part actually survives even King Tiger shells that don't aim properly, and it even survives Hori shells half of the time. In my experience, if you aim quite centrally or more to the left, your Hori one-shots it, but if you aim too much to the right or too much to the left, you can still easily take a shot from it. So don't underestimate the Jumbo. The Jumbo is very strong, and the cannon is good enough. It won't deal with the stronger or even strong BR5 tanks, but it will easily deal with everything on the ground that runs around. It will easily kill any APCs, and it will easily clear out bunkers and make sure you survive for a long enough time. So this is the main purpose of the Jumbo. if you see, alright, enemies have too many, the Pershings are too unsafe at the moment, enemies have too many ways to deal with it. The Jumbo is the safest metal box you can find, and it's even quite good against enemy planes, because you once again need to place the bombs very closely to the Jumbo in order to blow it up. The Pershing dies much more easily. So yeah, these are the two tanks I recommend to use. If you can only use one, well, obviously take the Pershing. But the good news is, if you're not very high up, and this is the best news, by the way, about Americans, if you're grinding your Americans and you haven't reached BR5, or if you even haven't reached BR4 yet, guess what? Well, the Jumbo is in BR4, so you need to reach it. But if you want to have an extremely good plane, you can find the P-51D already in tier 3. So for the planes, you won't need to grind too much. And for the tanks, having a Jumbo is also good. And an American teammate who has a Jumbo and a P-51D is already extremely good and extremely helpful. So yeah, having these two units already makes you a very good, helpful teammate for high BR Americans. What you have as infantry won't matter even that much anymore, as long as you play these two vehicles. Now, this was the good news. What about the bad news? Well, the bad news is everything on the ground. Why bad? Well, it's not that bad actually, but you really need to be very tight with your ground forces, meaning you're running infantry. Reason for that is, despite having some really good weapons, your weapons aren't that strong. And your enemies have stronger weapons. Yes, because there's nothing that can beat an FG-42-2. An STG-44 is also much better than a Thompson. And even the new Japanese assault rifle is better than an M2 carbine. So you're, once again, struggling uphill. So how can overcome this? Well, with strategic superiority. Now, the main aspect for the ground force of the Americans is to have good logistics, because since you will be basically forced to have 2 planes and 1 or 2 tanks constantly active, or at least 2 planes constantly active, though if you have the air superiority, it's a complete waste to not have at least 1 tank, because having 1 Pershing and 2 planes, and the planes make sure your Pershing don't get blown up, means that your Pershing is gonna survive. So you basically always want to have 3 vehicles, meaning the amount of infantry you have in your team is limited. Combine this with bad teammates who don't do anything, the amount of actual infantry squads that will do something on the ground and play the objectives is once again quite limited. So you want to have the maximum impact, and you ensure this by always having an APC. Now, my recommendation here, my setup for the ground forces, is basically a complete free-to-play account setup, because I literally have only 4, you can imagine it's 3 ground forces. Well, it's literally 3 because it's an APC and 2 infantry squads. Now, most important thing, you want an APC. You absolutely want an APC, and the American APC is also not one of the coolest looking ones. It literally looks like a basic truck. It's also one of the fastest ones. So this thing makes sure you can easily get anywhere quickly, and it's also tall enough that you don't drown in the Pacific Island rivers. So this is very much helpful. Also on many Normandy maps you have quite a good, you're actually quite hard to spot if you hide behind a bunch of bushes. So this is really good. Really good and helpful. Make sure you always have your APCs ready, because once again, lots of vehicles means less infantry on the ground, which means you need perfect logistics, you need perfectly fast spawning, close spawning to the objective, and the APCs make sure you get exactly that. I recommend you to always have a radio man in your APC, because if you spend a lot of time in the air, every time you get on the ground you will have your artillery strike open, so make sure you use it. I also recommend to have an anti-tank gunner, because vehicles are extremely dominant on the ground. Keep in mind your bazooka isn't that strong, so although it's the equivalent of the Panzerfaust 100 in the technology tree, it's more likely, it's very much closer to a Panzerfaust 60, yeah, so, but still, it has quite a good penetration, though not the best explosion filler, so yeah. The snipers I'm usually using only for fun. You could also just play an assaulter in that regard, but the problem with the American assaulters is, as we will find out in some seconds, they don't have the best weapon, and you instead get the best bolt action sniper rifle. So if you want to have fun, I strongly recommend to use the Lee Enfield number 4. This is just an absolutely insanely strong bolt action sniper. It has 10 rounds, it has ridiculously high damage. Look at this number. It deals the amount of damage on 300 meters that most bolt actions deal at 10 meters. Yes, and it's extremely precise. You basically never miss a single shot. So yeah, this thing is absolutely insane. Combine this with an APC that you park somewhere on the flank. You can sneak up to enemies and snipe every one of them. Yeah, so this is quite strong. You can also have, if you have access to it, get yourself more APCs. Theoretically, you could just play only APCs. You could even do the joke of playing only vehicles as Americans. So you spam a bunch of APCs and a bunch of planes and tanks, and have basically a completely motorized, mixed, combined arms army. Yeah, I recommend this APC very much because it's an APC that features 6 machine guns and they shoot by themselves. So you can just drive up or swim up towards your target, and your bots, your NPCs are gonna shoot the enemies. So, and you still also control one of the heavy machine guns yourself. So yeah, this is very strong. And if you have 2 APCs, you can basically always pick an APC, even if your other APC just got blown up. Very much useful. Now the question which infantry squads you want to play is obviously correlated with the strength of your handguns. So let's take a look at them. The historically accurate choice would be obviously the M1 Garand, which was the standard equipment for American soldiers in the Normandy invasion and later. But, well, guess what? BR5 isn't the place for semi-auto rifles. You absolutely need the full auto rifles, otherwise you will just suffer against the Japanese assault rifles and the FG42s, so you absolutely need your M2 carbines. Once again, if you're free to play, and especially if you just got your BR5 vehicles, or BR4 as I just showed, and you don't have everything of this, it's actually okay to literally just have the Garand or something else. You can also, by the way, you can make it yourself very simple. If you don't want to grind all the rifles, if you're a vehicle focused player, make sure you unlock the grenade launchers and then play this in all of your infantry squads. This is literally the easiest way. Some would say the most boring way, but guess what? Yeah, it's if you're free to play, you can't unlock everything in time, and you have to do some compromises. And this is literally the best compromise. Just unlock your grenade launchers, give them to every rifleman, and give your engineers and your specialists some random bolt action, and just run around with your grenade launchers when your infantry squads, because this way you can still deal with the overpowered enemy stuff. Enemies who use FG42s and assault rifles in general cannot complain about you using grenade launchers. So yeah, that's the deal with it. But you want, if you have access to it, the M2 carbine is your standard rifle. 30 bullets, biggest magazine size among all assault rifle weapon types. Quite a good damage and a very good fire rate, and even since recently updated sights, meaning you can actually aim with them. Very good weapon, very good weapon. And if you want to have an easy life, you can just use a rifleman squad and give everyone their M2 carbines, and you just run around with your soldier that you're currently using, and your bots are gonna spray at everything they see with their M2 carbines. Now, I personally use here a grenade launcher setup. Reason for that is the last anti-tank grenade launcher unlock makes it very easy to blow up all the APCs you find in the game. And it makes it easy to blow up most tanks you can find in the game, even King Tigers, if you know their weak spots. Yeah, so these are, I'd much rather play the grenade launchers than the M2 carbines. Also, they're more fun to use than the M2 carbines, since otherwise you just constantly spray. And this way you have more, you have more diversity among your weapons and a more fun play style. So yeah, if you want to make it as easy and simple as possible, just play one squad with grenade launchers and a second rifleman squad with with M2 carbines. This would be the most boring and easiest setup you can get, but also one of the most effective ones. Now, I strongly recommend to have a rifleman squad. Reason for that is, if you're vehicle focused, you need, once you get down on the ground, as many infantry soldiers as possible. Because, as I already explained, your teammates will instantly be in the vehicles again once you free up the slots. So you need as many soldiers on the ground as possible, and rifleman squads give you exactly that. Yeah, so I could theoretically just play a second rifleman squad over the machine gunner squad to just make sure I always have the maximum amount of soldiers. Reason to play machine gunners is, first of all, they're very, very fun as Americans. And yeah, they're simply very much fun. Also, as I already said in multiple videos, they basically give you the perfect specialist setup. You always get an engineer if you want. And you get a radio man. And you get an anti-tank gunner. So you can deal with everything. You can always build rally points. You can always call an artillery strike. And you can always blow up enemy tanks. Though it's actually arguable whether you want the anti-tank gunner as an American, because he won't be that, well, he won't be that reliable in blowing up tanks, but still better than a sniper, since the Americans don't get any overpowered full auto sniper rifles. So yeah, machine gun is really good. What specifically is good about their machine guns? Well, here's my secret setup that basically no one in the world knows so far. Most people just spam 2 of these, because this is literally, yeah. I don't even have to explain how overpoweredly strong this is. It's a 100 round machine gun with a quite low recoil. The horizontal recoil on this is actually high. The vertical is slow, but the fact that you have such a low fire rate means you... Yes, by the way, this is basically the auto slow fire rate of other machine guns. So yeah, you don't even need to switch fire modes. The fact that you have such a low fire rate means you don't feel the recoil at all. As long as you give your soldiers recoil reduction, this thing just sprays away the enemies. You never run out of bullets, and the damage is so high you actually kill everyone. So, and the damage drop-off is also very low. No matter how far away your soldiers are, even if they have vitality, 2 bullets will always kill them, and a good hit into vital spots will kill it with 1 shot always. So yeah, this is a no-brainer, but here's the problem. If you want to have your soldiers the maximum power, you want them to be more mobile, and you do it by giving them the Browning from BR3. What's the secret sauce in here? Very simple. This Browning is basically an FG42. Literally, it has almost the same stats, and it's also quite... It gives you remotely similar mobility. So you can run around with this weapon as your primary. If you find an enemy, you will be very fast to draw and get the first shot. And then, once the situation is safe, you can just lie down and whip out your big boy and start spraying the big boy 100 round magazine. So yep, this is my setup for the machine gunners, and it has proven to be very strong and also very fun to play. And I recommend to use this. I recommend to use the machine gunner squad too if you can get it, because yeah, the Americans really want to use their overpowered Brownings, and it's also very fun to have the historically very relevant weapons. As a responsible American citizen, you might wonder where them Thompsons at. Well, I'm using them on the pilots, on the tankers of course, and most importantly on the APC drivers. But using assaulter squads in your American setup is basically a trap. Reason for that is, the Thompson, even if you unlock its strongest iteration, the very cool looking drum mag Thompson with its 50 bullets, Thompson in the game is more like a trap. It has on paper very good stats, very good fire rate, very okay recoil, and okay damage. It's not assault rifle damage, but it's still very high SMG damage. So what's the problem? Very simple. If you compare the stats of the Thompson with the stats of M2 carbine, you instantly see the M2 carbine is just much better. It's just much better. The M2 carbine actually 2 shots a vitalityed up soldier on medium distance, whereas the Thompson needs 2 hits. And this is the most important difference. Also, aiming with the M2 carbine is easier and better than aiming with the Thompson, because the side picture is just much better. Also, you get a nice bayonet for charging, which is on short range extremely useful, since you can just charge into a house, randomly stab the first enemy that appears in front of you without even having to do it actively, and then just spray away. So this is something the Thompson can't do. Also, you can, well, if you want to play assaulters, you will have a 7-man squad with 4 assaulters. If you play a rifleman squad, you can literally just have 9 assaulters if you want, because they are called riflemen with the M2 carbine. So yeah, the M2 carbine makes the Thompson basically obsolete. The Thompson has its 50 bullets, yes, but M2 carbine is still better. It's literally just better. And in practice, in real games, the Thompson sadly underperforms. It sadly underperforms, also quite hard to aim compared to the M2 carbine. So yeah, I use it, obviously on the soldiers which have to use it, which can't get an M2 carbine. But anything else, anywhere I can put an M2 carbine, I put on an M2 carbine. I also recommend to do so, because once again, Americans are the underdogs and they have to min-max as much as possible. And the Thompson gets the min treatment and not the max treatment. The last of the overpowered high BR weapons we haven't addressed yet is the Flamethrower. Now here's the deal with the Flamethrower. Flamethrower squads extremely strong, though overall, since on high BR the engagements are more far distance than on mid and low BR, they are not useful too often. And if you're tight on squad slots, I would always play a machine gunner squad above the Flamethrowers, especially since a 100 bullet machine gun behaves quite similar to a Flamethrower, I dare to say. And rifleman squads are also just too spammy, too good. I don't personally have space left. But if you think rifleman squads are too boring, what you can do is just play a machine gunner squad and play a Flamethrower squad. You absolutely need a bunch of grenade launchers in your army setup for specific situations, which is also historically accurate. All the armies used a bunch of grenade launcher soldiers, which were trained for that purpose most often, because it takes a while until you can aim well, but once you can actually aim well in real life with a grenade launcher rifle, you become an extremely valuable asset to your squad or your platoon. And this is exactly how you want to use them if you don't spam them in the rifleman squad. In your machine gunner squad you will have 1 grenade launcher. Also very fancy, you can almost completely build your machine gunner squad with gold order soldiers. So I started doing so, and once the game gives us more good, hopefully good, because most of them are too low level, gold order soldiers, I will just have a complete gold order American squad. Also, the Medal of Honor looks very cool in Enlisted. Very nice looking item. So, yeah, you can do, by the way, the same thing with machine gunners in the Soviets. There it's even easier because they have more gold order machine gunners. Though they're sadly all level 2 and not 3, so I stopped using them. But yeah, regarding the grenade launchers, your machine gunner squad will have 1. Your APCs will have 2, and your Flamethrower squad will have also 2. So if you want to use them as actual, not cannon fodder, but specialized soldiers, rare specialized soldiers, having this setup will help you. It also will give you some nice historically accurate games where you only have a few grenade launcher soldiers, and whenever you need one, you will have one. For the end, we can go over all the other squad types and evaluate their usefulness. First of all, what about anti-tank squads? Well, here's the thing. The bazooka isn't strong, as we already found out, and the anti-tank gun that you build is also buildable with the engineer squad. So anti-tank gun squads for Americans, not really useful. Actually, they're literally the least useful out of all the nations. Then assaulters were already addressed. What about engineers? Well, they're a big question. Here's the deal. Engineer squads for Americans, yeah. On high BR, engineer squads usually suffer. Reason for that is, on low and mid BR, they are really good because their cannons are either perfectly powered against enemy tanks or overpowered against enemy tanks as in low BR. So you really want engineer squads there. The anti-air guns are either also very good or good enough against planes. On high BR, the enemy planes are just too fast. And oftentimes also quite tanky. So connecting one hit on low BR usually kills the plane. Connecting one hit on high BR usually tickles the plane. So engineers just suffer a lot. They're not that useful. And building a machine gun nest with engineers, well, guess what? The assault rifles are better than the machine guns that your enemies are carrying. So yeah, engineers are certainly not that useful. And once again, if you're tight on space, I'd rather have so many other squads. I'd rather have machine gunners and infantry and riflemen squads and flamethrower squads over the engineer squads. Flamethrowers we already addressed. What about medics? Well, what about, yeah, they're a joke. They're a joke. You can watch my low BR guide where I go a little bit more into detail why they're a joke. Simple answer is they don't have any engineer slots and they only have 5 soldiers and they only have medic 1. So you don't have medic 2, medic 3, medic 4 as with the assaulters, meaning you have very under-tiered level soldiers that are just too weak. Medics are great for grinding the game. I explained it in detail in the low BR guide. They are extremely good for grinding the game. And if you're playing low BR with not so strong enemies, you can just afford spamming medic squads and getting ridiculous amounts of experience with all of the tricks they can do. But on high BR, grind isn't that relevant anymore. What's relevant is staying alive and not getting your booty blown up by the enemies. So yeah, medics are just a waste. Mortars, well, yep. Similar, well, I tried to make mortars happen. I even released a bunch of mortar propaganda in the last month. But yeah, simply not worth it, sadly. You can use a mortar squad for fun if you have access to a heavy mortar and blow up enemy king tigers and enemy hories. This is, by the way, and I already can see people do it. By the way, if you do it, upload it somewhere so people can see it. It's very funny. If an enemy tank is gray zoning, just whip out your heavy mortar, mark the enemy tank and just shell him. Since tanks are very susceptible to damage from above, on the roof they will just die. Every single tank in the game dies against the heavy mortar on his head, on his turret. So yeah, that works. Ironically enough, that can be actually viable and relevant to take out hories and king tigers. But, well, let's put it this way. Heavy bombs also do the trick. But yeah. Motorbike squads are basically obsolete APCs, completely useless. Oh, paratroopers. Now that's a fancy one. If you have paratrooper squads, which sadly most people don't because you can't unlock them, you can either get them in events, which happen roughly every 6 or every 4 months, or you can buy them for some very big stacks. Yes, you can do that. And some of them are even good, and you might argue as paratroopers can be useful. Yeah, the short answer is I'd rather have the other infantry squads. I'd rather have the other infantry squads. If you want to play completely historically accurate, what you would need to do is play planes, play APCs, and play paratrooper squads. Because then you literally role play how Americans fought during World War II. With air superiority and with mechanization, with good logistics and with paratroopers. The only thing you would miss out on is artillery because the Americans used a lot of artillery, which is lesser known, but among German soldiers and officers they were known as artillery and airstrike first and only then engage with infantry. Whereas the Soviets were known as lots of artillery and lots of infantry, but not necessarily in that order, for multiple reasons. So yes. So yeah, paratroopers very fun, very much useful, but not necessary. What about radio squads? Well, If you have an APC, you will always have a radio man. If you have a machine gunner, you will also basically always have a radio man. There's simply no reason to play radio man. And bomber raids are completely useless on high BR because everyone has overpowered planes that can easily shoot down the bombers. Rifleman squads obviously S tier. Sniper squads, Americans have some of the worst in the game since your sniper rifles just aren't that good. So yes, that's the overview of the American army. I gave you some advice on how to play historically accurate, how to play for fun, and most importantly how to play for the win, because that's the actual hard part as an American. How do you win? Winning battles and especially complete wars depends on knowing yourself perfectly well, which you do now, but also knowing your enemies perfectly well. So I recommend watch the German high BR guide so you know what your enemies are up to, and the Japanese guide will come out in the next days. Alright, that's it. Let me know what you think, what your secret sauce strategies are, how you like and prefer to play your American armies, and my favorite type of comments, some cool spicy historical details about either weapons or strategies or vehicles or whatever. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe and share this with your burger friends, because they're absolutely gonna need the info so we have better and stronger American armies in the future. Okay? Until next time, goodbye.